The party began their trek back toward the city of Harmony, planning to gather supplies for Mavis and send them back to the Midway Manor where he would be staying to get the most out of his time spent tinkering, while the party waited for Chasiana to return within the next 5 days. The group noticed May's exhaustion, and Mavis called attention to it, asking if May was fit for travel. After some conversation, the group could tell that May seemed insistent that she simply was not able to sleep well in the mansion and preferred not to talk about the matter further. With that, Mavis returned to the manor, and the party began walking toward Harmony. After a few hours of travel, the group reached Harmony, and everyone split to take care of different tasks and agreed to meet at the Rumor's Reach at the end of the day. Gar and Laren took care of Mavis's shopping list by visiting a local smithy, run by a dwarf named Dane, that was more than happy to fulfill such a large order. Gar asked for directions to a furniture shop for the remainder of the list, and Dane mentioned a shop run by a human and another run by a gnome, but recommended the one run by a human, mostly out of spite due to the ongoing rivalry between gnomes and dwarves on the nature of the lost city of Besmeden, with Dane insisting that the city is, of course, a city of the finest smiths and forgers that Ador had ever seen. Before leaving, Dane was able to sell Laren on a set of finely made arrowheads, though Laren would need to find a way to make the shaft of the arrow. Gar and Laren decided to visit the furniture store run by the gnome, in an attempt to perhaps get a better price since the materials were being purchased for a gnome for the inventory. On their way to the shop, Gar noticed something strange. Some sort of tentacle-like appendage closing a door to a nearby house. Laren decided to sneak up to the house to see if she could spot anything through the boarded-up windows, but wasn't able to see anything beyond some pulled-up floorboards, which she found suspicious. The duo decided to wait to investigate further until the rest of the group could join them, and then continued toward the furniture shop. As they arrived at the furniture store, they met with a gnome named Fonken Leffery. After purchasing the items they needed, Gar described the apartment complex where they witnessed the strange event and asked Fonken if he knew of the building. Fonken explained that he had been hearing small rumors that there had been various disappearances in Harmony as of late, though he suggested the duo inquire at the Rumor's Reach for more details. Gar also brought up the city of Besmeden, and Fonken insisted that the city is, of course, a city of the finest tinkerers and inventors that Ador had ever seen, almost getting lost in his imagination as he wondered what marvels the city could have produced, even speculating if Besmeden could have been a flying city. After some more casual conversation, Fonken realized that Gar and Laren were part of the heroes of Kalcheth, stating that apparently the tales of their victory have slowly been spreading through the city of Harmony. Finally, after conversation had ended, Gar and Laren made their way to the Rumor's Reach for the evening. Meanwhile, May traveled toward the northwest portion of Harmony in search of a smaller bookstore, asking a member of the Resonance Guard for directions along the way. Eventually, May found a local bookstore and spoke with the librarian inside, a female gnome named Brina, for help with locating a few general knowledge books. May purchased books on fishing, science, arcane teleportation circles, and chess, topics pertaining to each of her fellow party members, in an effort to learn more about each of them. Then finally, May traveled back towards the Rumor's Reach and immediately went to sleep off her exhaustion. Zeos made his way toward Portals and Plains, a local store run by Torin Ebenictominus. Zeos asked if any response had arrived to his letter to Thalon Bauerus, and Torin told him that none had arrived, which he found perplexing, as one should have arrived already. Zeos began to share little bits of what he had learned on his journey so far, specifically of the Half-World, in an effort to see if Torin knew anything about it, but unfortunately with no luck. Torin, however, seemed almost excited at the prospect of a plane unknown to the world, and decided he was going to make a trip to the Arcanium in the city of Rand in an effort to research more about it. Zeos also asked about some details on teleportation circles to see if he could learn how to restore the links to the circles in the Midway Manor, and Torin explained that creating permanent circles is a lengthy process, but restoring damaged circles is much simpler, so long as the runes themselves could be restored. After wishing his friend farewell, Zeos headed back to the Rumor's Reach to sleep for the evening. Back at the Rumor's Reach, Gar and Belagron shared rumors, and Gar asked about the disappearances in Harmony. Belagron quieted down and said that it would probably be better to ask a bard for more details, but he reluctantly shared that rumors had been spreading that an old bardic college known as the College of Whispers was the one behind the disappearances, though he didn't know anything more on the topic. After a bit of catching up, the rest of the group went to sleep for the evening, and Zeos headed back to the Midway Manor to deliver the items that Mavis requested. Zeos also upgraded the study within the manor by providing one of his magic items for the manor to utilize, and decided to spend the next several hours reading a Sylvan book he had borrowed from the College of Lore. Before heading to bed, Gar returned a trolley he'd borrowed from the smithy, and noticed the house where he'd previously seen whatever he'd seen, but this time the door was open. Gar briefly went over to look inside, though nothing seemed amiss, so he decided to go back to the Rumor's Reach and tell the rest of the group about it in the morning. The party awoke the next morning, and Gar, Laren, and May met in the tavern. May looked much more refreshed, and Gar told her what he'd seen the previous day, and after a bit of discussion, the group decided to head to the College of Lore for a bit more research on what Gar might have seen. The group met again with Oliver Flynn, who expressed his sincere gratitude for the group's aid with Chasiana Thaurazil, and again stated that he owed them a favor, and that if they requested something of him that was within his power to do, he would do it. The group asked Oliver for his aid with researching the creature Gar saw, and everyone made their way to the appropriate floor that dealt with monsters within the College of Lore. Gar and Laren joined Oliver while he rapidly scanned various books, but May got sidetracked when she noticed a book pertaining to the Third Bulwark, a monster hunting organization located in the city of Trigate. She flipped through its pages, finding several stories written primarily by bards of the College of Valor, speaking of all of the brave and valiant efforts of the Third Bulwark, until she found a story with a name very near and dear to her heart. A story about Shuitan Marivaldi and the defense of a small town named Woodpine against the dangers of a dreadful Fomorian. May ran her fingers over the name in the book, unable to contain her smile, and simply sat in the moment for a while. Gar and Laren went to a nearby study room with Oliver, who had gathered all the books he could find on various creatures with tentacle-like properties. During their research, Gar brought up the College of Whispers, to which Oliver began to take on a much more guarded expression. After a bit of pressing, Oliver explained that the College of Whispers used to be the 5th Bardic College of the Grand Hall, but they were expelled when it was learned that they used discordant, negative notes of creation's song for personal gain at the cost of others, with anything from blackmail to pure fear. Oliver said that the College of Whispers still exists as a sort of underbelly to the City of Harmony, and Gar wondered if these negative notes could have anything to do with the disappearances that have been happening. The more they discussed the matter, Oliver eventually reluctantly shared that he was not certain that the College of Whispers was behind the disappearances, because he has a contact named Ebrick Lutger, a name that Oliver begrudgingly and somewhat ashamedly shared, stating that despite Ebrick's affiliation and unpleasant personality, he has been a means to an end when Oliver needed secret information in exchange for coin. Oliver told the group that Ebrick ran a cake shop in town, and that if Laren was to go in and ask for a specialist cake, it would be a form of thieves' cant, letting Ebrick know that she wanted information. Finally, Gar asked if Oliver could get maps of the city and a list of names of missing individuals to more accurately determine a possible pattern to them. Oliver stated that investigations have barely begun, and only a few members of the Resonance Guard are even taking it seriously, though a halfling captain named Osborne Elderberry was currently heading an investigation. Before leaving, Oliver told the party that if they were to contact Ebrick, to not trust everything he says, and that he scares easily. Oliver also said to not entirely trust everything they find within the College of Lore, since one of the ways that the College of Whispers retaliated against Harmony was to create history on any and all topics, to the point where it can be difficult to find what's true and what's fabricated. For a moment, May contemplated if the story that she read was part of this convoluted lore, but deep down, she knew it was true. Back at the manor, Mavis was hard at work on his invention for the inventory. Hours upon hours of refining metal, smelting ores, and hammer into anvil. And Mavis's mind went to the dream he had of the repeated sound of a hammer into an anvil, and his turrets all coming together and forming a humanoid shape with glowing red eyes, when suddenly he heard something fall at his feet, breaking him from his thoughts. As he looked down, a single four-spoked cog lied on the ground. Mavis called for Gunther, wondering if he had something to do with it, and as he began to leave his room to search for answers, he heard the sound of metal gathering behind him. And as he turned around, he witnessed the pile of gears and sprockets and various metals that he'd been working with begin to coalesce and assemble themselves into a vaguely humanoid shape. Mavis tried to stop it, even resorting to simply asking it to stop. As the strange, misshapen construct stood in front of Mavis, Mavis stared back at it with confusion and fear, and suddenly, its eyes flashed red, causing Mavis to close his eyes and shake his head, and as he opened his eyes, he saw the pile of metal and scrap on the ground back where he left it, with the four-spoked cog still in Mavis's hands, which he then dropped to the ground. As he looked down at the cog and began to leave the room for a much-needed reprieve, he heard a small voice in the back of his mind that simply gave him a warning. Be careful.